It's good to see everyone. Good to be here. I don't know about the rest, but the time change has me today. I've been in a fog all morning. I guess that's from losing an hour last night. Let's try to decide if I want to do this. I think I'm going to save this for just a moment. We're in the book of Ruth. Got a little bit into chapter 2 last week. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. I shall we left off at chapter 2, verse 9. This is where Ruth and Boaz will begin to interact, which of course will eventually lead to their falling in love and marriage. Chapter 2, verse 9, Boaz is speaking to Ruth. She had gone out and she just happened to end up at the field of Boaz. She began to reap, and of course we talked about the commandment in the old law was to leave the corners of the field, don't go over the field twice. That was to leave some provisions for the widows, the poor, the strangers in the land. So Boaz, Ruth catches his eye. We talked about that, verse 5. He asks about her. This is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. So then, again, small town, people understand, people know, and word has spread. This is Ruth. And so he knows who she is because the people have told him about her. He knows she's looking after her mother-in-law. He knows she left everything behind so that she could go with Ruth and follow her. So she asks him in verse 7, please, if it's okay, and you can just imagine Ruth, knowing her character from what we know from the book and all what we've already seen, you could probably imagine she's very meek and saying, look, I'm not, I don't want to, overstep my bounds or whatever. Is it okay if I just glean a few things here from coming behind the reapers? So they had told her that was okay. They're kind of relaying this to Boaz there in verse 7. And then Boaz addresses Ruth. And he says, you don't go to another field. You don't even leave this field you're in. You stay fast. You abide where you are. Stay with my maidens, these maidservants that are helping his reapers. Then verse 9, let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. Well, ordinarily, if a stranger or just a random person comes up there and, I'm thirsty, I'm going to come up here with the workers are going to kind of, well, what are you doing? You're not one of the workers. It's one thing for the stranger to come and grab the leftovers, the corners of the field that they were supposed to leave, but it's another thing to step in just like you're one of them. But Boaz is telling Ruth, that's not a concern for you. When you're thirsty, you go where the workers go. You're going to be treated right, and you're going to be treated very well. So she fell on her face, bowed herself to the ground, and said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? She doesn't expect this. She doesn't think, she's not expecting a handout, let's put it that way. And she is just very humbled by his display of grace and generosity. So Boaz answers, it's been fully shown to me all that you've done to your mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother in the land of thy nativity, and art come to a people which thou knewest not heretofore. He says, I've heard about you. I know you've left your home. You're taking care of your mother-in-law. You're working hard. And no doubt he knows about how she left her, I guess we would say her religion, her gods, little g gods, her idols. And she is following Naomi, but most importantly, she's following God at this point. So he understands that. He's heard all this. And notice verse 12. This is a tremendous metaphor to describe what's happened with Ruth. He says, the Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. God has taken you under his wings now, he says. You have come to the God of Israel. You've come to the one true God, and he's not going to turn you away. He's going to take you in under his wing. We still use that terminology today. We'll sometimes say you're helping somebody out, you're taking them under your wings. And so he uses that metaphor to describe her trust in God. Of course, this is the type of trust that all of us should have. And again, he's making allusion here not just to her treatment of Naomi, but to the fact that to her personal religious decision. She is doing what she sees and knows to be right. So she says, verse 13, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for that thou hast comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, though I be not like one of thine handmaidens. I'm not one of you, but you've been very, very kind to me. Boaz tells her, he says, that at mealtime come thou hither, and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was sufficed, and left. So he basically is treating her like she's working for him. The workers sit down to eat, she's going to sit down and eat with them. Ruth and Naomi, they're in a very difficult situation, a very uncertain situation. They've come back from Moab. They didn't really have much of anything. And so, it's the famine is over, but for a single woman, it would have been a very difficult situation. And again, very uncertain. So this, I say that to say, try to put that into perspective when you see the reassurance that Ruth is receiving here. This is, when you go out into a field as a stranger, a widow, whatever, fatherless, widow, someone who's needy, we'll put it that way, and you're going to those corners that they're supposed to leave, or you're going to the leftovers that they're not supposed to go back over the field twice, you're still not getting a whole lot, right? And it's going to be a lot of work, it's going to be a lot of effort, and you say, okay, well, today I went to this field, but guess what? If they've already gleaned it once, and you went and got the leftovers, and you went to the corners, then guess where you ain't going tomorrow? That same field, right? You're going to be in a different field. And not everybody is a good, faithful Jew, right? Some people might say, no, you go on. Not only that, are there other poor? Are there other needy? So they might come and say, no, you find yourself a different field. I got this one. I noticed this, by the way, in Costa Rica. Speaking of needy people, there were sometimes people that were, Hainer said, usually it's someone who's not, they don't want to work a real job. They don't want to go out and work and find a job. But, they're not just total bums, I guess. Because what they will do is they'll go to what would amount to Walmart for us, a little supermarket. And of course, you don't have the 18 entrances that you do here. You usually have one way in, one way out. Well, they'll put on one of these little, almost like a reflective vest, and they'll go, and when you pull into the parking lot, they'll say, there are 15 empty spots right here, right? They'll go, come on, right here. And they're going to guide you into that spot, and he'll stand in front of your car and tell you to stop. It's a real difficult job. And so when you leave, he wants a tip. And it blew my mind. I thought they worked for the store for the longest time. And I thought Hainer was a big jerk because he never paid them. And I thought, man, he just goes into these stores and he leaves. And then he finally one day explained, these are people that they're not getting a job. And this is what they do, and which I'll give them credit. At least they're doing something, right? But what we were laughing about and asking him on this last trip is, well, do you have like territory? I mean, is it just first come, first serve, or is, you come to Jorge's store and Jorge's going to show up and he's going to beat you up because that's my parking lot, So he says, no, it's pretty much just first come, first serve. So anyway, That's kind of, some of the similar modern day illustration, I guess, because you come to a field if you're Ruth and you come to a field, you decide, okay, I went there yesterday. That's going to be pretty well cleaned out, so I'm going to come to this field. Somebody else is there, and they say, no, not here. So it's uncertain, and so all that's just to say, I hope we're getting a little bit of a picture of the kind of reassurance this would be for for Ruth, and of course Naomi when she goes back and tells her what kind of reassurance and encouragement this would be to have a man say, not only is it totally fine that you reap here, I want you to come back tomorrow and the next day and the next and the next. And we're going to make sure you have provision. That's a big deal. And then he invites her to eat with his servants. She eats until she is satisfied. She has plenty to eat. So she leaves. And when she was risen up to glean, now it gets even better for her. Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves and reproach her not. Now she doesn't even have to go to the corners of the field. She's in the field. He says, you let her reap among the sheaves. And it gets even better, right? Because then he says what? Let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them that she may glean them and rebuke her not. That's a little bit odd language, a little bit awkward wording for us, the way the King James words it. You know what he basically says? Hey, drop some. Drop some on purpose. You can make it look like an accident, whatever, but drop some. I want this lady to have all she needs. It's interesting throughout all the history and of mankind, some things just don't change, right? I mean, she has caught his eye, and he's invited her to dinner. He has said, I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. Now he's, kind of on the side over here telling his servants, you make sure she has plenty. You even drop some on purpose so that she has plenty of wheat, barley, whatever it is they're harvesting here. She's got plenty to eat and to take home. So again, he is looking out for her. This is, I don't want us to mistake, a lot of this is the kindness of Boaz, and obviously we see that he's a very kind man. He's kind to the stranger. He's also kind because he's heard of how she's taking care of her mother-in-law and how she left home and left idols to come and worship the one true God. But she's also caught his eye, and he's interested. So he tells them, let her reap among the sheaves, let some fall on purpose. So she gleaned in the field, verse 17, until evening, and beat out or threshed that she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. So I have a note in my text that an ephah is about 1.1 bushels. Is that what you've got? Some of y'all probably have a note in your text, 1.1 bushel. I'm trying to think how much a bushel comes out to, honestly. It's a fair little bit. So I guarantee you this, it's a lot more than you get if you just go into the corners and you're going for the leftovers after the reapers have already reaped. It's way more than that. And the point of the text is she did quite well on this day. This is after she's threshed it, bear in mind. You remember you thresh wheat and barley, these grain type things. You'll thresh and thresh and thresh, and you have this chaff and stuff. And sometimes, in fact, if we ever get a chance to take another group down to the archaeology museum in LaGrange, you'll see this. They have these big bowls. You can hardly even, I don't know, a person with big long arms might be able to get their arms around it, but there are these big bowls and there are handles on them. What you would do is you'd thresh a bunch of wheat into that bowl, and when you get the grain in there, you go out where the winds are, where there's nothing obstructing the wind, and you take that thing and you kind of, it's a real shallow type bowl, but a gradual, and you just kind of toss it up. And when you do, of course, what happens? The chaff just blows away, and you see that metaphor used a lot in Scripture, right? The chaff, like the chaff that the wind carries away. Well, you throw that up, and the chaff gets carried out by the wind, but the grain is heavy enough, it'll fall back down into the bowl. So you do this several times, and now you're left with nothing but grain. Yes, sir. 20.8 quarts. Okay, quarts puts it a little, that's probably a little more familiar term, at least to me. 0.65 bushels. 0.65 bushels. So that's a lot. I mean, you figure a threshed grain that is basically ready for grinding or whatever purpose. So that's pretty good. So he's taking care of her. So she takes it up. She goes into the city, verse 18. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed. One preacher said, some versions have it at the end of verse 14. Some versions don't. The King James doesn't. The King James just says at the end of 14, she did eat and was sufficed and left. But it's implied when you get down to verse 18, because Ruth gave to her, Naomi, after that she had reserved after she was sufficed. So one preacher said Ruth took a doggy bag home with her. So she ate with the servants, but she also took some back. This is Ruth. She's looking out for Naomi. She's been blessed, and she doesn't just, chow and eat, and she ate till she was sufficed, but then she set some aside to take home to Naomi. So her mother-in-law says, verse 19, where have you gleaned today? Where have you wrought? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. She says, somebody's been kind to you. She understands this is not what you bring back when you've been just kind of going among the scraps in the corners of the field and the leftovers. So she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, the man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord, who had not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. So she's still tying this in with her husband. Of course, Naomi is that is. So Naomi said unto her, the man is near of kin unto us, one of our next kinsmen. So you could just see her pretty much lighting up here, Naomi. Ruth has become like a daughter to her, and so she says, it's almost like, you got to be kidding. You went to Boaz's field? Do you realize he is a near kinsman? This they start putting this together. Hey, maybe this is providence. So Ruth, the Moabitess, said, he said unto me also, thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. And Naomi starts matchmaking here. She's getting a little ideas in her head here. Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, that they meet thee not in any other field. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean to the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. So Naomi's getting, she's getting the matchmaking idea. She realizes, he's a near kinsman. Naomi's a little bit older, and she knows, as most women, even young or old, she understands his actions show that he's taken notice of her. He's not just saying, well, sure, I guess it's okay if you go out to the corners of the field and get the leftovers. I mean, after all, that's the requirement of the law. No, he says, you stay close to my young man. They're going to make sure that, they're going to make sure nobody comes and runs her off, because sometimes not everybody was as courteous, and it might just come down to, if I could run you off from this property, I'm going to run you off, and I'm going to take it. Might even take what you've already picked up. So he's going to make sure that doesn't happen. He's going to make sure she has plenty. Naomi gets all this, and she says, he's taking notice of you. So she's starting to get these ideas. Verse 23 is kind of a summation of a long period of time here, or at least a decent period. The harvest, this continues through barley harvest and through wheat harvest. I don't know the exact months, but this will be a period of a few months, because it's two different harvests. So there's an ongoing period. No doubt Boaz continues to interact with Naomi, or Ruth rather, in some form, but it's crunching all that into one verse. So don't lose sight of that. This goes on throughout the end of the barley harvest, which of course barley harvest was going on, we just read in chapter 2. and through the end of the wheat harvest as well. So then, chapter 3, verse 1, Naomi's going to say to her, to Ruth, "My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee?" Now she just comes out and tells her, "I'm going to find you a match." She says, I'm going to help you out. "Now is not Boaz of our kindred with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor." So this is getting back into the barley harvest time. Unless there's a possibility this could be down all the way to the next barley harvest. We're just not really given a timeline, so bear that in mind. We don't know for sure exactly how much time has passed here, but she's getting ideas about the kinsman redeemer. This was typically initiated by the widow, by the way, but the kinsman redeemer was to keep the family name alive, and so she tells him he's going to be winnowing as part of the gathering, threshing process. He's going to be winnowing barley tonight in the threshing floor. Again, if you get a chance to go to the place down in LaGrange, you'll see they have a threshing floor there, and you'll kind of get an idea of what that was like. There may be, sometimes you could take big stalks of wheat and beat it on the threshing floor. It would also be in an open place, and the wind's blowing across the threshing floor, and then they would gather it up. There's another place where you go and you'd have some kind of a stone or something that could go around and grind the grain. But very, very interesting to see how that process went on and all the different steps that it took. And they even have an in-ground. A lot of times we see big silos now. We see grain, corn, soybean, whatever stored in those big silos. They had something similar, only instead of building them up, they many times dug them into the ground. So there'd be a kind of a staircase that wind around that, and they would store grain down there in the ground. It was more even temperatures that way. But anyway, so she says he's going to be. There was something else I was looking for in my notes. I mentioned that the widow was to initiate the levirate marriage process. Oh, I was just going to mention that this is, and of course this getting a little bit ahead, but I did want to go ahead and mention it, that but there's some typology here. We mentioned that before in the introduction. There's some typology, Boaz being typical of Christ, the Redeemer, in other words. He's the kinsman redeemer for Ruth, and of course, by extension, Naomi. But Jesus, of course, is our Redeemer. We're not redeemed with corruptible things, 1 Peter 1:18 and 19, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without spot and without blemish. So don't lose sight of the typology as you go through this. I was looking at something else. Okay, so back to chapter 3. She says, Naomi saying to Ruth, "Wash yourself, therefore, anoint thee, put thy raiment upon thee, get down to the floor, but make not thyself known unto the man till he shall have done eating and drinking. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet and lay down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do." She said unto her, "All that thou sayest unto me, I will do." Of course, leaders last year covered Ruth and I think Judges as well, and that was the theme. All that you say to me, I will do. So she says, Naomi tells her, it's like getting ready for a date here. Clean up, put your raiment on, put your best clothes on, nice looking clothes, anoint thee, that'd be like your perfume, and go down to the threshing floor. And so she tells her what she's telling her what to do. Again, playing matchmaker. Naomi knows Boaz's activities. I don't know if maybe they had the conversation from chapter 2, and Naomi has figured this out. Maybe she's talked to some of the other widows and older ladies, and they've had sometimes that happens, doesn't it? Where the women get together and talk, and they find out about things. But so I don't know. It just doesn't tell us. But whatever happens, she knows his activities. And so she's telling Ruth, I tell you what you need to do. Here's what, follow my advice. And so Ruth says, whatever you say, I'm going to do. So she goes down to the floor, threshing floor, did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid down. Some people have taken this, verse 7 and said he's drunk. Like he's been drinking a lot of alcohol and so he's drunk. I don't see anything here that mandates that at all. It may be that he had. Well, I just dropped everything. It's possible, but don't just assume that. Now I'm going to need like 10 minutes to get myself back together here. I just dropped everything. So don't assume always what the Bible does not imply. I looked at this, and sometimes this terminology is used and will mean that someone was drinking alcohol, but not always. So see if I can figure out my notes now. And it just says he had eaten and drunk. It doesn't say he drank alcohol, but it just says he ate and drank. So that's the I don't know. I've looked at that and studied because sometimes a lot of commentators and folks just assume, but it came to pass. Verse 8 says, at midnight. The man was afraid, turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. Now, this whole process is just, it sounds very strange to us. It sounds very odd. And we read it, and sometimes people read it, and they say, there is something going on here that's just not right. She's sneaking in with this man. Like, understand that this is harvest time. There are a lot of people at the threshing floor. This is not something weird or illicit going on, because there are all these people there. But then people say, well, what is it? What it is basically is that this woman is going to Boaz. It's some kind of a tradition, and that's really all we can say. We don't know a whole lot about it. It's some kind of symbolism in the Hebrew society of here's this, beginning this process. Again, the widow typically initiated the levirate marriage process. It's the idea of spread your skirt over me. It's kind of like that terminology of God taking you under his wings, someone taking you under their wings. That's what she's saying with the expression, spread your skirt over me. Take me in, take care of me. You are a near kinsman. And sometimes people read this and they say, well, yeah, what a strange tradition. Well, one preacher pointed out, and I think it's probably true, do you ever think that there are cultures that look at us, or maybe even one day looking back years from now, if the Lord tarries, and they'll say, what a strange custom those Americans had. A man gets down on one knee and asks a woman to spend the rest of her life with him, and he puts a piece of metal on her finger. And then they get married, and he puts a piece of metal on her finger. What a weird tradition that is. So, every culture has some unique traditions. And sometimes even down to individual families have unique traditions. But this was some kind of a Hebrew culture. But the big picture here is symbolism. She's approaching him to initiate this process. Are you interested in taking me as your wife, to take care of me, to fulfill the levirate marriage law? That's what it comes down to. So she tells him, as he asks, who is this? There in verse 8, and she says, I'm Ruth, and that's where she uses that terminology, spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. Now he tells her, verse 10, blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. You're a beautiful lady. You could have had a young man more your age. He's obviously older than her. You could have had a richer man. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. He said, everybody knows. You are a godly woman. You're a catch, he says. And I would love that. However, and then now you get to the however. Verse 12. Now it is true that I am thy near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. I wonder if how disappointing that must have been for both of them, for Boaz and for Ruth. But he says, listen, tarry this night, it shall be in the morning that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, fine, we would say. Let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then I will do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning. He says, don't move. You stay right here. Don't go anywhere. She lay at his feet until the morning. She rose up before one could know another. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came into the floor, the threshing floor. Again, typically they didn't have the women there. My guess is here he doesn't want it to appear that he was trying to sneak a woman in or something like that. But she's there not for some kind of illicit purpose. She is there to ask him to initiate this process of the levirate marriage and to ask him, do you have any interest in performing the role of the kinsman redeemer? So Ruth leaves. He says, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, laid it on her, and she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, who art thou, my daughter? She told her all that the man had done to her. And she says, these 6 measures of barley gave he me. For he said to me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. So again, he sends her away. He's not going to send her away empty-handed. Then said she, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. Naomi's got some pretty sharp people skills, doesn't she? She understands. This guy likes you, and he is very interested in you, and you just hang out right here because I guarantee you he's handling this right now. He's going to find out yea or nay. So Boaz goes to the gate. He sits down there. The kinsman of whom Boaz spake came. He basically takes 10 men of the elders. Verse 2 says, sit you down here. So they sit down. This is typically the way they would do this. There's also in LaGrange at the museum there's a city gate, a replica city gate, so you can kind of see what some of this would look like as people sit down in the gate for judgment. You'll see that mentioned several times in the Old Testament. So he says to the kinsman, Naomi that has come again out of the country of Moab selleth the parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's. I thought to advertise thee, saying, inform you, in other words, buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If you'll redeem it, redeem it. But if you'll not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there's none to redeem it besides thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. Well, see, they're talking land right now. He says, sure, I'll redeem it. Then says Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Now the kinsman says, time out. I can't redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. He wants to, again, this is all about land staying within the family, and there are instructions to this in the book of Leviticus and in Deuteronomy. But he says, if you redeem the land, you need to marry Naomi as well to perpetuate the family name. Then he says, I can't do that. He's more than likely already married and has a family. Now this was the manner, that's verse 7, in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor. There was a testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman, and this was a testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. This is again talked about in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. The idea, if you're not going to perform that role of the Redeemer, you take off the shoe, he would be called the man whose shoe is removed. Again, it's just one of those traditions that it doesn't necessarily make sense to us, but it was a cultural thing for them. So Boaz says to the elders and the people, your witnesses this day I've brought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. The people say, We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. Boy, isn't that an understatement? And let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. When he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. The women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. He shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. Everybody in the community knows Ruth has taken care of Naomi. They say she's better to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the child, laid it in her bosom, became nurse unto it, and the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. And then it closes out with the generations of Pharez. Pharez begat Hezron, Hezron begat Ram, Ram begat Amminadab, Amminadab begat Nahshon, Nahshon begat Salmon, Salmon begat Boaz. By the way, who was Salmon married to? Wait, I think I got the wrong one. I think it's Nahshon. Does anybody remember this? This is Hebrew History 1-2. Rahab from Jericho. One of the other women in the line of Jesus that's mentioned specifically, non-Jewish women. And then Salmon begat Boaz, Boaz begat Obed, Obed begat Jesse, and of course Jesse begat David. So what a bright spot in such a dark age for Israel, right? There was so much in the period of the Judges that is frustrating, that is discouraging, and you know, it ends with chaos and confusion, but then you have right here in the middle of all that this beautiful love story. This woman who leaves idols to serve the true God. Meanwhile, you've got Israel over here, by and large, leaving the true God to serve idols. Ruth leaves idols to serve the true and the living God. She forsakes her homeland. She forsakes all that she has to go with Naomi. She's going to take care of her. She's going to look after her, and she does that. And then Boaz performs the role of kinsman redeemer, and they have this child that will go on to be Obed, Jesse, David, the grandfather of David, the great king, and of course in the lineage of the Messiah. I love the book of Ruth, especially when I read Judges, that you know, you just, like I said, you get kind of discouraged sometimes reading the book of Judges, but the book of Ruth is a bright spot in all that. So that'll conclude Ruth. What we'll do, I didn't get to this, I wanted to mention it. I want to talk, we'll talk just a little bit next week before we move into 1 Samuel, because I had a question this week, and somebody did my work for me, because Robert had asked me about the intermarriage, Ruth being a Moabite, Boaz being an Israelite. Did they sin? Did it just, you know, what's the deal with that? And then, like I said, Robert asked the question. I wasn't sure, and I said, I'm going to do some checking on that. And next thing I know, Robert had found an article that, I don't agree with everything in the article, but I think he addressed it pretty well, that they would not have been in a sinful relationship by doing that. But we'll explain why next week before we move into 1 Samuel and begin introducing that book. Thank you very much. It's good to see everyone, and we will have a